Hey, Browns fans, Spencer German coming to you live from Cleveland Browns Stadium. Anthony Moeglin doing his thing at home, but we both consumed this. What's the adjective we want to use to describe this game today? It was pretty ugly at times. It was a preseason game, right? Like,
Yeah, preseason's the right way. There's not a good thing to say about an ugly looking preseason game for sure.
yeah, it was pretty brutal. Now that said, that doesn't mean there's nothing to sort of divulge here and take away. I don't think the Browns, and this was kind of said after the game too, like they weren't giving a lot away today in regards to their offense. So I don't know that we saw a lot there. But yeah, Browns lose 23-10. They went basically for three entire quarters in between their scoring opportunities. They kicked a field goal on their opening drive of the game. Jameis Winston leads them down the field, and they settle for a 55-yarder that surprisingly, for some, K. York did knock home. And then they didn't score again until Aiden Robbins scored a touchdown with about 5 minutes to go in the fourth quarter. So I don't know. Like there's a number of different directions we can go here, Megs, but I think maybe starting just with kind of the beginning of the game there, that opening sequence, which actually started with a blunder on defense. Ronnie Hickman gets beat, and they score a quick 65-yard touchdown in their first drive of the game, Jordan Love, and that kind of got things started. And then they obviously answered with the field goal on the other end. But yeah, I mean, I thought Jameis looked like Jameis, and it seemed like a solid start to the game, and then it just kind of spiraled from there.
Yeah, even before we get into Jameis, I'd love to start with talking about the defense kind of as a whole, right? Ronnie Hickman specifically, like that kid exploded onto the scene last year and became a huge part of what Cleveland does on defense. But tonight, they had mentioned something I heard earlier in the week is that you're not going to get, especially in preseason week one, you're not going to get a lot of game plan looks. The looks you're going to see are just pretty standard stuff. So really deciding or figuring out who can cover, what other team, what you can do to make an offense really, really work. And putting Ronnie Hickman in a situation where he's got to guard a wide receiver out of the slot, it's pretty tough. The discouraging part of that is that he came up a little limp. We've certainly in our time spent covering the team have seen our fair share of injuries, enough injuries to go around. But seeing Ronnie Hickman kind of grab his back a little bit is not something that you want to see. But more importantly, seeing him trying to cover out of the slot, right? He's at a disadvantaged position. Safety against the receiver is not great, but giving up a 65-yard touchdown on third down is not the way you wanted to start out the season. I know it's preseason, but there's still that little feel to it, giving away, a massive
Yeah.
to start.
I mean, it was one of those funny situations too, where the guy gets, like, I shouldn't say funny, that's not fair, but it was one of those situations where the guy gets hurt in the play, and you're almost like, is he really hurt, or is this kind of like, I'm kind of hurt?
Yeah.
Right. But he didn't come back in the game, so I think we're safe to assume that he really was hurt. I do think injuries were a big storyline today, which we will get into. But to kind of bring it back to where we were, Jameis comes right out, leads that field goal drive. And I know you sort of highlighted a couple things that you saw that were maybe problematic for that first team offense, or the bones of the first team offense. Obviously, not everybody was out there.
Right, not the entire first team, but one of the good things before some of the bad stuff is a big completion to Mike Woods. Mike Woods III. He's a guy that you may have forgotten about. He's a 2022 draft pick, 6th rounder out of Oklahoma. And he's a nice little piece. He's somebody that is really competing for that 5th receiver spot. We've written about it a lot, Spencer, over on the site. But really that wide receiver room is pretty set. With the top 4 guys, you got Amari Cooper, Jerry Jeudy, Elijah Moore, and Cedric Tillman. Pretty much have their names penciled in to that lineup. And there's one guy left really for that 5th spot, and you're going to see Spencer. He'll pop back in here in a second here. But really, what it comes down to is that 5th spot on that in that receiver room. As Spencer jumps back in, but
sorry,
no, you're good. You're good. Leaving me out to dry here.
It's the preseason for us too.
Hey, preseason for us. We got to work out the kinks. But you see a nice completion of Mike Woods. Mike Woods last year tears his ACL, misses the entire year. But if you rewind 2 years, he didn't make a huge impact. But when Deshaun Watson came back late in the season in 2022, he made his mark. He had a couple catches and was a guy that, hey, maybe there is a piece. He's 6'3", can run, can catch. So he had a really really nice catch to get the Browns into plus field position. When I say plus field position, that's on the Browns side of the 50-yard line, right? Attacking to go score. From there is where the problems ensue. And this is going to be a big problem, and something that's really starting to rear its ugly head is that we have to protect. There's a big problem at our tackle position. Our right tackle position, I think we got a diamond in the rough in DeJuan Jones. Drafted him in the 4th round last season. He was unbelievable in 2023. Was on pace to be a Pro Bowler before he got hurt, but his injury comes back. He looks good, looks great. The rest of the line has got a problem, and especially at left tackle. We don't know what that left tackle situation is going to be. You got Jed Wills, who we haven't seen yet in camp. Jack Conklin, where is he going to fit in? He's been your right tackle, got hurt last year thanks to a Jed Wills missed block, but gets hurt, tears his ACL in week 1. We haven't seen him yet. So what's going to be that left tackle position, and what's going to be up front? You got an older Joel Batoni, you got maybe a question mark at center with Ethan Posick, and we got an injury tonight with Luke Whippler breaking his ankle. So a lot of question marks up front that frankly have to get solved before September 8th.
Yeah, I mean, I think the offensive line is I don't want to say it's concerning yet because it's, again, one preseason game, but the injuries obviously last year, and there's guys who haven't come back this year. You're still waiting on Jedrick Wills. You're still waiting on Jack Conklin. What does that group look like once those guys are back? Who's maybe going to go where? There's already questions about Jed Wills and his ability at the left tackle spot. So these are all things that the Browns are going to have to answer in the weeks ahead. And I don't know that we're going to get a clearer picture in the preseason game next week because the team's planning on using these joint practices coming up in the next couple of days with the Vikings as kind of their preseason game against them, where they iron out a lot of these things with the starters. So we'll see. But you make note of that, and I think it's worth noting that there might be some issues there early on. But it's also so early on in camp still that generally defenses or generally offenses are kind of ahead of defenses at this point. So I think that's the other way around. Defenses are usually ahead of offenses at this point.
Head of offense,
yeah. And they're kind of able to just go do their thing, and it takes the offense a little bit to get going. So it's it might take some time, but I do understand where you're coming from with that, and it's something to keep an eye on. From there, though, I think the middle of the game was kind of a slog. Not a lot of good drives. There was moments where it seemed like they were moving the football. I know Tyler Huntley sort of took over after those first 2 series from Jameis Winston, and he was moving the ball a little bit, but never really got in scoring range. There was a play down near the end zone where they went for it on 4th down and didn't convert. But in total, I think you look at the team stats and you kind of see just the type of game that it was. 244 yards of total offense is it. 188 passing, just 56 rushing. The one thing I think that stands out about that is this kind of alludes to what we've said with this new Ken Dorsey touch points in the offense, where you're going to get more passing than probably running. And, what does that mean for certain players on this team it kind of remains to be seen. But I did think we got a heavy dose of the pass today and, not so much of the run game going. Granted, you didn't have your best backs out there necessarily, but.
Yeah, no, your run game's always going to come a little bit later, and it's especially good. And for me personally, I was excited to see what the Ken Dorsey passing offense looked like, and really, you mentioned it up front. We're scratching the surface. You're not going to see any of the complex.
And DTR talked about that after the game. He said, we weren't really showing a lot, but I think that's expected.
And that's the hard part about these preseason games, right? We want this so badly to be a good barometer of what this team's going to be, or a good measuring mark of what this team's going to be. But the truth of the matter is that when you play in these preseason games, you don't game plan for the opposing team. You don't game plan for yourself. This is just an extended work period, right? This is an extended practice is what it boils down to. So you got to see some of those downfield vertical routes, which I've been looking forward to because it's something that we haven't seen in this offense. And there were some elements there, right? And it's going to take some time to kind of hammer them out. But I can think of a couple of deeper outcuts to slot receivers that, I think of one in my mind that Cedric Tillman got his left hand on, almost reeled in a one-handed catch from Jameis Winston. But just some stuff that you haven't really seen from this Cleveland Browns offense before, and something that's really exciting because it is going to bring an element to the game where, hey, if we are down late in the game or if we need a big drive, you're going to have the passing offense to do so. We got a dose of it tonight. Didn't get the whole thing, but it was nice to see some of that stuff starting to evolve, if it is at the sacrifice of the run game, at least early on. here in this preseason.
Yeah, Jameis Winston got the 2 drives. He was 4 of 5 for 30 yards, led that field goal drive early on. Tyler Huntley was 6 of 9 for 41 yards. We'll get to DTR in a second, but he had the best night of all the quarterbacks, 14 of 18, 131 yards. He led a touchdown drive late in the game and showed some poise. I thought he looked pretty good. Granted, it was against, third teamers. The receiving numbers, Jamari Thrash led the team with 3 receptions, 43 yards. Amarian Brown had 2 receptions for 26 yards. And I actually thought Pierre Strong played pretty decently. He had just 6 rushes for 15 yards, but there was a couple screen plays that he kind of got going, did some nice things. I tell you what, man, like that running back room is interesting because the situation with Nick Chubb, but you got a bunch of guys behind him who I think are all vying for roster spots and are going to be competitive. And Strong being a special teamer, like he's so important to that special teams group that I think he's probably going to make this team, but he actually showed some stuff today that made me think like, okay, he could be more involved in the offense. And I know we kind of felt that way last year, and he kind of got involved as the injuries piled up. Mm-hmm. But yeah, like I continue to be impressed by Pierre Strong, who's had a really good camp.
No, he's a guy who you got to be super excited for because he brings an element to that running back room that, truthfully, Spence, we haven't seen. Right, with Nick Chubb, you got that big bruiser, but he's got. Nick Chubb's is one of a kind, right? He's huge. He can run. He can run through you, run past you, whatever. But now you got big backs. We've had bigger ones like Kareem Hunt, who've been kind of that power back. You got Deontay Foreman this year, who's going to be more in that power back role. But we've really never used that scat back type of a guy, and that's what Pierre Strong really brings to the table. And he's that guy who can get out in space. He's athletic. We got him in the trade from the Patriots 2 years ago. So it's like, hey, this season, it's like, what can you provide to us? And truthfully, like you said, he's a special teams ace. He's a guy that can be used in those special teams groups. And then when you get the opportunity on offense, he's going to be able to be an impact player, a guy who can really not stretch the field vertically, but really provide that element of speed and stretch it kind of within the tackles because he does bring that element of speed to that running back room that's a little bit different than the other guys in there.
Let's get to DTR. Like I said, best night of all the quarterbacks. I thought he showed some poise in the second half. He got the entire second half to himself pretty much. Or I think he actually did get the entire second half to himself totally. And, I mean, it took a while to get that touchdown drive, but there was a couple plays. He had that 4th down run where he kind of hurdled a guy to get it.
Yeah.
After throwing the ball away, too. The drive previously, like that tells me he's learned some things from like holding on to the ball too long and trying to do too much. So I thought that was good. This third string or this third quarterback battle is one of the more intriguing, I think, conversations about camp in general. And I thought if you're looking just kind of today, I felt like Dorian sort of, cemented himself as maybe the guy, at least at this juncture, that is worthy of maybe earning that spot. Granted, we got more of him than we did of Tyler Huntley, but it definitely seemed like the guys who played with DTR really responded to him, played well with him. And I think that was the thing I looked at specifically because Huntley did some things well. And we know he's a veteran in this league that can do some stuff. But I just thought like the way that guys kind of played and responded to Huntley kind of commanding his group that he was out there with was pretty telling.
Yeah, no question about it. And Dorian, is a guy that, you just root for, right? He comes in last year. He had a couple situations last year that were just so tough for a rookie to have, right? You think back to the Ravens game where he finds out he's starting an hour before kickoff, right? And it's just a situation set up for disaster. And then he takes you into the Denver game and really gives you a really good game right up until he gets concussed. And that concussion kind of ended his season. So he's kind of working back through it. And you were just so excited to see the way he looked this year. You see signs of growth, like you said, a couple throwaways, couple, making plays with his feet and looking really good in doing so. And then just like the element of growth of just like growing through the offense, right? Hey, you got a whole half. Let's get some stuff going. There's a couple 4th downs that they went for in the red zone that would have been field goals, right? So you can stack some of those wins, stack some of those nice long drives, some of those nice completions, and really grow off of this, right? He had the first opportunity to kind of win that third quarterback spot, and he did a really nice job tonight. Completed all of his passes, no passes were in danger, and really moved the team up and down the field.
I don't know that there was any massive takeaways for me on the defensive side of the ball. I thought Devin Bush played really well, but that's kind of, a starter playing with some other, a mix of players early on. And so I thought that kind of flashed that he's a pretty good player in his own right. And that's kind of to be expected. But yeah, certainly saw some stuff from him. I thought it was notable that Mike Hall when he was out there several points, especially as you kind of got further down the depth chart of the guys that were playing around him. He was getting double teamed a couple times. So clearly there's a level of respect there from the opponent. Again, not showing a lot on either side of the ball, but they clearly felt like of the guys that were out there at that time, they were most worried about Mike Holland. So I think that kind of speaks to just the presence that he has on this roster and on this team. So I thought that was good to see. And then, yeah, I think I was watching a little bit of Nathaniel Watson kind of run around trying to make some plays on defense because, again, another rookie that's trying to make an impact. Then he got hurt and left this game, and that was disappointing. I'd be remiss, I think, if I didn't mention the injuries too. Yeah. We had, to me, and I mean, I understand like there was some excitement at the end with the Dorian Thompson-Robinson touchdown drive, and people were, they were really highlighting that here in anybody's post-game responses. But to me, like the injuries, I thought kind of became the story of the day, unfortunately, because I'm not really I'm not taking a ton of stuff away from this game anyway, Megs. But to me, it's like the one thing you want is to get out of this game healthy as possible. And you have the Luke Whipple injury, what you alluded to. He fractured his ankle, will have to have surgery. Kevin Stefanski wouldn't say if it's season ending, but he said he's going to have surgery. You're now very thin at center because Brian Allen, who was on this team, hit the IR, and then they released him, and they were still at the Greenbrier. So that's a situation now that you have on your hands. And then on top of it, you had the Hickman injury. You had the David Bell injury, another position wide receiver that dealt with some injuries last year. And, the guy who's trying to earn a roster spot, obviously, and David Bell. You had, I think it was Vincent Gray, who he got injured at one point, about one of the reserve safeties on this team. And then Watson, as I mentioned, I was watching him pretty closely for a while, and then he got hurt making a tackle. His seemed like one of the least of the less severe than the others, but he made his way off the field. And now you got that situation at another position like center that is pretty thin right now with the linebacker group because they've got injuries piling up there. So I think that's the biggest thing for me is like you didn't get out of this game as healthy as you hoped, and now you have even further, issues in that regard to kind of figure out in regards to the injuries, and they're trying to aid some people to get back healthy before the season starts. So that I think that was maybe the most disappointing thing of the day, beyond just like the sluggish offense and all that, because again, it's the preseason. Yeah. I thought that was disappointing.
Yeah, it's the word that keeps coming to my mind is it's a joke. Like at what point do all of these injuries stop happening, right? You know, and they're not, and it's not like, like a cramp or something that you can get over in a week. It's like Luke Whippler is going to be out for a significant amount of time. Like that's a broken ankle. And that's a guy who, you draft last year and someone who potentially is going to be taken over for Ethan Posick when Posick does decide to move on from Cleveland. So it's like, hey, these are big, impactful guys. And now, like you said, now you have one center, and now you have a problem with your center depth, depending on the timeline of Whippler's return. So it's like, man, oh man, they just can't catch a break with the injuries, and it is frustrating. It's disappointing. It truly is, because a lot of that stuff, I'm not going to sit here and say that I could go out and cover a guy running down the field and not hurt my back, right? Like I'm probably hurting my back, I'm pulling my hamstrings and my calf at the same time. But like, it's just disappointing because a lot of it feels like it could be very unlucky in a lot of situations.
I mean, there's nothing you can do about it ultimately. Like, unless I guess you're going to question the Browns training staff. I don't know, but
I'm certainly not.
It is, it's just tough. Like, what are you going to do? But it just felt like another day where injuries kind of ruined the day. And it's unfortunate because I feel like that's been sort of a theme of camp already, that the injuries have kind of piled up, especially at certain positions. Well, I do want to throw this out there. We didn't see a ton in terms of like creativity on the kickoff play just yet. Yeah. And I know Bubba Ventrone mentioned he doesn't think anyone's going to really show much of anything in the preseason, which is probably fair. I'm just going to put it out there, Megs. I have my doubts about this play being like this explosive play that we think it is. I'm being dead serious. Like all the preseason games I've watched, and again, I get it. People aren't showing a lot, but it's like you're getting the returners bringing it out, and they're trying to return it, and they're getting tackled in the same spot. It's like they're right at the 25 or just beyond the 25. Once they hit where the line is kind of forming, they're getting tackled anyway. And I think it's going to become one of those things where teams are going to we're going to get like 6 weeks where I think people try stuff, and then once they start to have more like the more numbers on it, they're going to figure out like what the average starting field position is off of the kickoff. And if it's less than, if it's like around the 30-yard line, if it's like 27, 28 yards, I think they're just going to kick it into the end zone and say, we'll just give you the 3 yards and save our players from getting hurt and screw it. You know what I mean? So I think conversely, like obviously if it's above that, if it's like the 35, I think teams will still just kick it in the end zone because they're going to say, well, we'll just put it at the 30. So I don't know that this is going to be the explosive play that someone made it out to be.
Dude, it's so funny you bring that up because truthfully, everyone listening, we haven't talked about this. And I was going to ask the question of what it felt like because on TV, it does, Spence, exactly what you said. It looks like, hey, it looks different. And it looks like, hey, there's something new happening, obviously. But it doesn't do anything different. Like we get out to the same exact spot. Yes, it's less contact. You love that. You love the less force that's happening. You don't got guys sprinting 60 yards before making contact. Certainly, that is awesome, and I love that. However, from the place perspective, we spent the whole offseason talking about, hey, let's sign this guy or what
got overhyped
to score touchdowns.
It got overhyped.
And it got way overhyped, exactly what you're saying. And it's just going to be the kickoff that we had last year.
I'm staking my claim to that take right now. I think it's going to end up not being what we think it's going to be.
I'll die on that hill with you. I'll die on that hill with
I mean, we'll see. Maybe it'll change come regular season time. But what I've seen so far, I have my doubts that it's going to be this great scoring play that was kind of pitched as when they made the rule change back in the spring.
Before we wrap it up, there's one guy that we have to shout out because he got his fair share of criticism. It's Cade York. Banging a 55-yard field goal. He got certainly his fair share. He needs a statue in Cleveland just for that Carolina game in 2022.
Oh my God! Can you imagine if they had lost that game?
If they lose that game, you pretty much just delete the franchise from Cleveland, send everybody home, and it was fun while it lasted. But he hits that, goes through his struggles for a year and a half. Gets re-signed, comes back today, bangs a 55-yarder into the dog pound, which was part of his struggles. So I think it was important to shout him out after a nice kick tonight.
Yeah, it's fair. I don't know if there's going to be a kick of controversy though, because
I don't think there is
locked up.
Right.
But maybe he's going to earn himself a spot somewhere else. We'll see.
Or if somebody wants to trade for him.
Greg Joseph was in the house tonight. It was just it was a former Cleveland Browns kicker reunion. It was Cade York who came back to the team, and Greg Joseph who used to play here. Like all the former Browns kickers made an appearance.
The kicker graveyard, right? The Cleveland.
Yeah.
Graveyard.
Where was Zane Gonzalez and all the others? We needed those guys.
We could go down.
Cody Park. Exactly. Cody Park. Yep. The list goes on and on. That list is getting as long as the quarterback list that's on the back of that mannequin.
Right.
Guys, we appreciate you jumping in with us and listening to our post-game coverage of the Browns' 23-10 loss to the Packers today. And again, just the preseason. So we're not taking away a ton from this and using it as gospel, but I wanted to break it down with you guys and just kind of talk a little bit about what we saw today. We implore you to go over to Cleveland Browns on SI and check out all the writing pieces that we have going out for you about this game and some of the post-game stuff. I'm probably going to work on something here shortly about DTR and just what he had to say about his poise at the end of the game as well. So you can find that up there. We also encourage you to continue perusing through the Browns on SI YouTube channel, where you can find all kinds of content like this, our breakdowns, press conferences. I know Kevin Stefanski spoke after the game. He's already up there. We'll get some players coming as well. So we implore you to do all that. And of course, we will continue to have the coverage that you look for when it comes to Cleveland. Monday, they resume practice. I think Kevin Stefanski will speak tomorrow, but we'll have practice on Monday, and that'll lead into the joint practices with the Vikings sort of midweek here.
Huge week this week. So just from a fan perspective, a lot of the work's going to happen during the week between Monday through Saturday, right? Where they're in those joint practices. Those are super competitive. Those are scripted. They're controlled. So guys get a lot of really good work between going against different teams, right? That's a big deal. So maybe next Saturday you won't see the competition that you saw today, but a lot of that work that's going to happen between tomorrow to Saturday is what you want to tune in for. So come check it out on the site.
Yeah, you're going to want to follow along all week long with that, and we appreciate you guys again as always for your support and your viewership and your readership. So we'll be back with more coverage, of course, of your Cleveland Browns.